Sioux Falls City Council informational meeting of Tuesday, June 7th. Welcome, everybody. Your full council is here. And I would open it up with City Council open discussion. Is there any open discussion? Councilor Staley, you have some? Okay.
Yes, I just wanted to mention a little bit about the Neighborhood Watch program. I had contacted Chief Burns and met with him, and we are, I'm going to be going out to he's targeted 5 different neighborhoods that they feel could use that Neighborhood Watch presence. They have the high volume calls, and I'm going to be taking some flyers around door to door and seeing if people would be interested in that. So if anyone would like to go with me, I'm going to go a week from Saturday. So we're going to create those flyers, and then the city will be making some signs that they put at the parameters of the whatever the watch area would be. Sure. And then the other thing I was going to ask is it would be really wonderful if sometime if we could have an informational and have the Chief Burns come in and Sheriff Milstead and just talk to us about the different functions that the county does for our law enforcement and in conjunction with the city, just to kind of bring us up to date about how those two entities work together. So I would desire to have that at an informational sometime.
Feeling of the council? Go ahead.
I guess I particularly would like to hear from the standpoint of crime in the city. As I was going door to door, there's a perception that crime has been increasing, and just where are we at, what are we doing, and so I guess I'd like to hear it as well.
Okay. Would it be anybody else from the council? I'm sorry.
On that topic or different?
Yes, I agree totally. I think that was to kind of dovetail a little bit about that. We have an issue in the Northeast with some zoning things that are coming up and moving some property in rezoning. And there were 60 people that showed up on Sunday afternoon for a community meeting. And one of the things that was top on their priority list, other than the zoning, was the amount of crime in the neighborhoods and areas. And I think that'd be a great topic for us to discuss during an informational.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I appreciate Councilor Staley's efforts getting the ball rolling on that. I'd be happy to help in any way we can on that.
Okay. Jim, could you arrange that for us at a next earliest opportunity? That would be fine. Anything else?
What on a new topic, is that okay?
Yeah, oh yeah, we're done with that one.
Okay. I've heard some commentary, and I have no idea whether there's any truth to it or not, that there's talk about whether or not they would need to pave the north part of Spellerberg for more parking. So I'm curious, maybe if there's an update on Spellerberg Park.
You should check with, there is one scheduled, I think, an update. The end of July will be our last one. Go ahead and call probably Cotter. Mark Cotter, or no, who would that?
Kearney?
Parks is Don Kearney.
Kearney, yeah, Don Kearney. That was never in any plans that we ever saw that I'm aware of.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised to
So
hear.
I think it's somebody making a motion or an idea that, we're going back on what we said. That's all going to be park area up there north. So, Councilor?
And as some of you know, I have kind of a watchdog in that neighborhood, and there's a bunch of that space up on top of Spellerberg that is pretty flat right now, and it's pretty dirty right now, but it is, if you look on the website, siouxfalls.org, the map is there. The map has not changed. All of that is brand new playground. It's a much larger picnic shelter. Wonderful restrooms on the upper level, which with young kids, the restrooms were a long way away in Spellerberg. Now they'll be right there by the playground, in addition to brand new tennis courts, brand new basketball court, brand new volleyball court. It's going to be a wonderful neighborhood park, in addition to being the regional park that it is with the pool. So no, that's one of the things that you kind of have to learn in this job is don't believe everything you hear, confirm it before you say it out loud, and that's one of those things that rumors are rampant when it comes to that stuff.
Go ahead.
Well, I certainly didn't believe it. I just had been called by a few people that said that they had heard this, and it was out of left field, and I was saying, I never heard anything like that. I thought, I had seen the plans, and so I'm happy to hear that we will have another informational with another update on the indoor pool, and I'll look forward to it.
Yep, that'll be good. Okay, you have something, Councilor
I do have
Urbanbach?
other topics, if I could.
Well, this is the third one, so isn't that 3 our limit? No.
Well, I can make it relate to Councilor Staley's remarks. How's that? It
Okay.
dovetails with that. Then you're still only on 2 topics, if that's your
We're
concern,
2.5
Mr.
then,
Chair.
okay.
Last week, or not even last week, the last time we met, whenever that was, we had the Sioux Empire Network of Care gave us kind of an overview of that new program, that pilot program for connecting many of those agencies that help those people in need, that there will be eventually be this database and all sorts of ways for us to help people in better ways, more efficiently. And so that organization, Sioux Empire Network of Care, is involved with that, and I've been active with that group. Another group that they mentioned that was part of that whole sort of web of people is a group called the Hope Coalition, and that's really a group that was brought together by a couple of community leaders that started by reading the book Our Kids, The American Dream in Crisis by Robert Putnam. And what the Hope Coalition is doing is they've all read the book, and it speaks to that issue of crime. It speaks to that issue of people in need in our community, and it weaves together stories, real life stories of people in need across the United States, and it compares the economics of the United States from the 1950s until present day, and the things that have happened to not only our economy but to the way that our families are raised, the way that our extended families are separated, those kinds of things. It's a fascinating read, and it's an easy read. Even though it's kind of a textbook type topic, it's very personal. It's based on Robert Putnam's hometown along the Great Lakes area, and it's a wonderful read. And I just thought one of the things that the Hope Coalition has been doing is everybody's buying extra copies of the book, and I've been doing the same thing and evangelizing with it, handing it out. I have 2 more copies left from my collection. I'd really like the council to, if you would like, to take that and read these books, borrow them and trade them around. Let's share them together. But to just kind of ingest that idea of what it means to be poor, what it means to have your housing situation uprooted, to have your job situation changed. It really does put a real life perspective on poverty in America today, and and then it offers several solutions, some ideas for ways that communities can go after that. And you'll see that then as you read through it, it'll start to click for you that you'll see the Hope Coalition is doing many of the things that are happening in the book. And that organization, Thrive Sioux Falls, is also following sort of the model that came out of the Our Kids book. So I just invite you to share that. I have them here, and they're yours to share around or buy your own copy or whatever, but I don't have to have them back. I'd like as many council members as possible to read it so that you understand the information that the community is living on when it comes to this sort of topic. And then the companion book for me is actually recommended by Councilor Rolfing, Toxic Charity. And it really does help put into perspective that idea of what's the difference between sort of mission work and that, hand up versus a hand out kind of concept. Toxic Charity is a great read. Also a small book, very easy to read. And so, again, I'll just have these books here. It's Our Kids, The American Dream in Crisis by Robert Putnam. There is talk of possibly having him come to the community and speak at some point once there's enough people in the area, and there's a lot of people that have read the book. So it would be an interesting dialogue to be part of. So just wanted to throw that out there, that there's lots of things going on in this community that it's great for us to be part of.
Thank you very much. I would be interested in taking a look at one of those books. Councilor Erickson.
I just want to say happy 29th birthday to Pat Starr.
We usually don't sing, Pat, so we won't now either.
How about Christine did already?
Oh, she did. Much better than the rest of us singing, I'm sure. Anything else from open discussion? Seeing none, let's move on to our, and I will tell you our first agenda item, a presentation by Denise Tucker is going to be moved to July 5th due to some unforeseen circumstances, and we're looking forward to having that at that time. So let's move on to Shape Places, zoning ordinance refresher and for the existing and new elected officers. Jeff Schmidt.
Thank you, Jeff Schmidt and Jason Bieber tonight. We appreciate the opportunity to come before you and talk a little bit about the Planning and Zoning Office. We're going to make this relatively quick. We know that everybody's busy, but this is just basically a refresher on the zoning ordinance. We're going to try to go through these slides relatively quickly and leave it up to you to ask any questions that you may have. So the guiding tools in the Planning and Zoning Office. We have the comprehensive plan, Shape Sioux Falls, because it's all encompassing. We have the subdivision ordinance, which is the subdivision of land. Then we have the zoning ordinance, and at that point you're down to the place, the land that you're at. And then once you get through those things, then it really comes down to administrative rules and regulations, which you have engineering design standards and building codes. So there's been a lot of public background in this. Back when we did it, in 2008 and 2009, we had 2 years of involvement. Then for 3 years prior to Shape Places, we had public meetings that were advertised and open to the public for people to come out and participate. And now here again for a different topic, but when we did the comprehensive plan, we're doing an update. This is the 5th year update. In May, we had Thursday night meetings. Every Thursday night, we had open houses at the public library. We advertised them. We got out there. We banged the drum to have everybody to participate and come out. And of course, everybody was there that wanted to be there. So, but again, we're always out there asking people to participate. So we always work to try to get transparency and have people interested in our topics. So, Shape Places. It is the zoning ordinance. It was a major update back in 2010, 2014 to the 1983 zoning ordinance. At that time, what we were trying to say was that we wanted more development options. We wanted more consistent and predictable regulations, and Jason's going to go over the specifics of these things. We wanted new planning options, and we needed a more user-friendly format. Then what happened again, council passed it in March of 2013. The citizens brought it to a referendum vote. It passed by 65%. Remember everybody to vote today? So it passed 65%, and April 16th of 2014, we had our new zoning ordinance in place.
And I'll go through some major aspects of Shape Places. You as a city council hear rezonings, preliminary plans, and ordinance amendments. Over your 4-year term, you hear roughly 200 separate items. Most of them also have a first and second reading, so that's 400 agenda items that we present to you over the course of a 4-year term. The average is roughly 5 a month. The summer months are busier, June with roughly 9 items. Then our lower months are usually beginning of the year, which is February, around 3 items. Last year we did 101 of those above 3 topics we brought to you. So far in 2016 we're already at 50 items, which equates to roughly 10 items per month. So we're ahead of last year. Why doesn't Sioux Falls regulate developers to a greater degree? Property rights are one of the most cherished American freedoms, and the Sioux Falls residents have requested for generations that the zoning should not be so burdensome that their property rights are infringed to more than a moderate degree in the name of orderly, efficient, and compatible development. A zoning ordinance must balance the needs of the orderly, efficient, and compatible development with every citizen's private property rights, with a process of adequate and public involvement. Those would be our public hearings that we have at Planning Commission and in front of you at City Council. And it also must provide equal treatment of all citizens. How does the Sioux Falls ensure equal treatment in the zoning process? One, as Jeff mentioned, one of our major goals with Shape Places was to get consistent and predictable zoning regulations. Zoning regulations that are consistent and predictable ensure an informed development community can develop in an efficient and profitable way which is then balanced with the assurance to all citizens that compatibility standards for the neighboring properties will be enforced equally throughout our community. And how do we do this? First, we have zoning ordinance standards. These are standards that are within our current zoning ordinance and are specified by law. These regulations are generally required an administrative building permit and not a public discussion regarding standards. Second way is conditional uses. Conditional use permits are a valuable tool for adding flexibility to one-size-fits-all zoning use classifications. However, a conditional use is not a rezoning, but instead a permitted use to which reasonable conditions may be attached based upon factual findings. Discretion and public input is limited to these standards that are set in the zoning ordinance, ensuring both developers and homeowners can rely on the consistent and predictable regulations. How does the Sioux Falls provide public involvement for the zoning process? The zoning process that is responsive to developers' market needs is balanced with a development process that is responsive to citizens' and homeowners' quality of life. And this was one of the major goals of Shape Places, is zoning matters. Zoning or rezoning is the process to create a responsive development process for all property owners. It allows zoning changes that are directed by the comprehensive plan and allows for public input through the public hearings that allows for transitions and mitigation of development impacts that homeowners need. The comprehensive plan itself was in response to the citizen needs for a course of action in managing growth, planning neighborhoods, and improving sustainability. As we go through these public hearings for rezoning requests, we do hear obviously a lot of neighborhood concerns. The top three ones we always hear are drainage, traffic, and property values. Just all rezoning requests are vetted through all departments within the city. If any concerns of those are from any of the departments, they are addressed with the applicant prior to the public hearing for Planning Commission or City Council. So we do look at these specific concerns with all requests. Up here, this is the compatibility chart within the Shape Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan. The chart assesses the degree of compatibility of proposed and established zoning districts. This chart is one of the tools we use in identifying if a rezoning request meets the comprehensive plan. As you can kind of look on here, red obviously is bad. That means it's not very compatible. And green is good. It means it's exactly the same or compatible. The zoning ordinance also identified potentially incompatible land uses and provided separation distances from these incompatible land uses to schools, churches, and single and two-family residential uses to protect these areas. Some of these uses are full-service restaurants, on-sale alcohol, kennels, adult uses. If these distances cannot be met, a public hearing process is required to give the neighbors the ability to bring any concerns in front of the Planning Commission. The ordinance also provided buffer yard standards. These were created to protect existing single-family residential neighborhoods. There are 4 levels, A through D, and are based on that previous compatibility chart. More compatible the adjacent land uses, obviously the less of a buffer yard is required. The picture in the lower right, that is an example of a level C buffer yard, which would be like a single family use adjacent to a retail building of less than 25,000 square feet. Shape Places also added a second layer within the zoning districts called forms. The developing parcel selects an allowable form within that zoning district. Those are the ones on the right. This form then indicates uses allowed as well as setbacks, height, size, and buffer yard requirements. Detailed information sheets were also created for all forms. These sheets indicated uses allowed, setback, and buffer yard requirements. Also, illustrations were constructed on the sheets to give citizens and developer an idea of what could possibly develop adjacent to their property, with some pictures of some existing developments within Sioux Falls. The main goals of the shaped places was the ability for the citizens to understand what can be constructed next to their property, as well as protecting single-family residential neighborhoods. And myself or Jeff would be happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
Anyone before Councilor Neisert takes the floor? Councilor Neisert?
I'll be mercifully short. I'll take a lot of this offline because I do have some things I want to talk to you about. City-initiated rezones, how many are on the list right now?
I believe we are going to be taking them actually for you in the next couple of months, and I think I gave Jeff the list, and we had 8 or 9, I was going to say, that will be going probably to you guys in the beginning of August.
And I've always wondered why not bring them forward right away when an applicant needs it.
Because they're time consuming and we just don't have the staff to be doing them every single month. We kind of try to get them together. Our actual planning intern will be the one that's kind of doing all the postings. We do all the postings. We send out all the letters. So we kind of take the lead on all of it. So it takes up a lot of our time. So.
Okay. Conditional uses that predated shaped places. So as an example, if there's an existing use, let's say a Walgreens, and it had a bunch of stipulations that were added 10 years ago, are those still in force, or did conditional uses extinguish with shaped places?
I think I'll have Jeff answer that one.
With the new zoning ordinance as of 2014, all the conditional uses went away and the conditions went away with them. So then that was zoning matters, the property got zoned, and that's where we started off as of 2014.
So they follow whatever the
Zoning
regulations are today?
Correct.
Okay, so, okay. And then kind of a minor question, but a citizen actually asked me about this a few hours ago. The UT1 form, it allows electrical substations. Would it be prudent to have a separation distance from those from maybe single family? Right now we have, it looks like there's just buffer yards. I think they brought up the idea that, I think there was an uproar about Falls Park, I think when we were talking about doing a substation close to there. And their contention was that why would we put one close to a house? Has there been a lot of uproar in any years that you can recall of a substation being an issue?
No, there hasn't been. There hasn't been. Again, we've taken under advisement from city council or neighborhood issues. It's more typically that neighbors would show up and say, we don't want it. We don't want it in our neighborhood. And the issue is always, then how do we put electricity into the neighborhood? Okay. You either have it or you don't have it. And then that's one of the reasons, again, for council's education awareness. It's not a conditional use issue. Where what conditions would you put on an electrical substation? Do you paint it blue? Do you paint it green? What hours of operation do you want to put on it? It's either electrical substation or it's not. Either allow it or you don't. You can't change much about it. So we're like, it has to be in your neighborhood. You have to have electricity. So then we put a buffer yard around it. We made it, again, consistent, predictable. Everybody knows. You go, it's there. We don't put it in the middle of the neighborhood. People need electricity. That was a neighborhood facility. That's why we allowed UT1s. But we haven't really had neighborhood issues have arisen. If it became an issue, we'd raise it back up.
Okay, and I'm sorry.
Okay, one more.
One more, okay. As far as a comprehensive plan, is there any plan to do any substantive update? For example, the dots. Like, for example, 41st and Minnesota, should that be changed to be a green dot or a red dot?
And Greg smiled at me when we discussed this at the very beginning, and so I'll smile back. Based upon all the public input we took over the month of May, there will not be any real substantive changes. It was a minor update. Basically, we updated to the comprehensive plan the new demographics, the new population items. If there would have been public input that said, and that they showed up during the month of May and said, this is a big issue for us, we were taking it under advisement, but the public heard about it. There's not a big outcry for it. Specifically to your issue, we're showing on the new maps, we're going to show an existing community employment areas and a proposed community employment areas. So that's how we're handling it.
Other questions? I have a couple. What happens if and we've had a few of these where the zoning has not fit quite right with shaped places, or else we've gotten it a little bit wrong, and come back to us and said, we need to change this one because it makes sense to be here rather than where it was originally put. What about those issues that have, those ones that had CUPs, conditional use permits on them beforehand? If they all left, if they were very specific for one reason or another, why wouldn't we have kept them?
Why wouldn't we have kept them? We addressed the majority of them in the new zoning ordinance. And secondarily, when the new ordinance went into effect, the new ordinance went into effect. They were no longer grandfathered in. There wasn't a specific way to handle it legally, to go back in time and enforce an old regulation on something that at that point we had had a law, we had had an election, we had a new ordinance in place. So those were no longer.
Let me give you an example, Jeff. The one we had, go ahead.
Again, because if you look through case law and you look through, it's kind of an offline discussion, but basically what happens is the zoning was passed by an ordinance and was passed by council. All the conditions were by resolution. So the resolutions went away.
Okay, my concern is something like that could have happened on, let's just say the one we had last week with the, on the Elmwood property, South Elmwood property, where the people wanted to rezone their lot so that they could.
Rezone the lot. Rezoning's by ordinance, not by resolution.
Let's assume then that this happened 8 years ago.
Right.
When we were under the old system, and we allowed a conditional use permit to allow that to happen. That would have automatically come back then, and we would have had to make that, give me the deal on that.
An RT1?
RT1, yeah, RT1, traditional. That would have automatic, which is exactly what we didn't want to happen in that situation.
Correct.
So that everyone else, but then you would have had to have made that RT1, which would have set the precedence, and we didn't want. So my concern is that we have a lot of conditional use permits out there that were lapsed.
And you're kind of going in the same direction that we were going. It came down to what was passed by law, what was in the books by law.
But couldn't we have just had in there,
No.
all CUPs remain?
No.
Why?
Through the legal means and by having the laws versus the resolutions. When we passed the new law and having the law adopted in 2014, those were the laws that were going to be in the books. And we made.
I understand that, but
So.
I guess I did not realize that when we passed that, that all CUPs were going to be gone.
And again, now moving forward from that standpoint, zoning is what matters. It's in the books. People understand and they know it. Okay, this is what's the law, not by a resolution. And so again, when you have that public discussion, should it be this or should it be that? It's a determination, yes or no, on the law, not on a conditional use that's more flexible on the standard.
We're doing a lot fewer conditional uses now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, an awful lot fewer.
Yep. Okay.
Councilor Staley.
I've heard that there have been properties that have been rezoned, and the property owners are not aware of it, and then down the road, there could be a hardship with them, or if they wanted to have a rezoning, they have to pay, how much is it is it like a
$500.
Okay, unless they, and that is waived if they're willing to wait, is that right? I mean, that's an expedited cost?
I'll clarify, yep. So the property owners were all notified that their properties were changing, and then we changed the properties to what their properties were currently built as. So there was nothing that was done incorrectly, so it was to what their property currently existed at, what their legal rights were. So then that was what was done in 2013 and 2014. So then if it was done incorrectly, if they were a commercial property and they're sitting there as a Walgreens and it was zoned to residential, then it was our mistake and we'll correct it. If they're a residential house and they come in and they say, yeah, but we want to be commercial, well, that's not a mistake, then they have to change it. And again, it's a public, transparent process. So we don't want to just administratively change it. So they should come in front of this body and have a transparent discussion about it and say, we're residential, we should have been commercial, they should discuss about it so that all the neighbors know. And that's kind of how we've handled it. If it was,
But the cost for that is always the same?
Yes,
It's,
yep.
so even if they, because there was something I thought if they wanted it done more quickly.
no,
you
nothing about expediency. It's like, if they just want it changed, then they change it. If we did it incorrectly, then we'll change it. But as Greg asked the first question, there aren't any more that still need to be corrected by us. We only have 9 left. That's all that's to be completed.
Counselor?
I guess I just have to just throw something out. It's been shared with me that generally somebody will come to get a building permit. It could be for anything, to add a new deck. And occasionally, this is rare. I mean, there's like 60,000 parcels in the city. So, we're talking about a small number,
right,
conceivably. And to be completely open, when you're rezoning 60,000 parcels, some are just going to get, it's just going to happen. Yeah. Good faith errors. I've had people talk to me that had, for example, it looked like a single-family home, and they'd converted it to a duplex. I mean, that's just what
Whether
happened.
they converted it legally or non-legally.
Sure, yeah.
Correct.
But, so they go in to get a building permit, and
Yep.
at that point, they're ready to go. They're ready to do their project.
Yep.
And they've shared with me, they were told, we can put you on the list, and you can wait 6 months and do it at no charge, or you can pay and do it right now. And with a lot of reservation, they paid because they needed to get something done. And if that's true, I don't understand why that would be.
Okay.
Does that ever happen?
Not necessarily.
not-
Jason kind of answered the same question. So the ones that needed to be done, if it was an error, then the city took care of it. If it was their error, then they could take care of it. They could do it, and if they needed to take care of it, they would take care of it expediently and do it. Most of them would come in, they go, yeah, it's not that, I'd like to have it changed. Go ahead and take care of it. So the expediency aspect is really what you're talking about. If it was our error and you're bringing up a specific example, if it was a single-family house that got converted to a duplex and we didn't cite, and that was our error, then yes, we'll do it and we can get it done. But when were we going to get it done? With the staffing we have, we've done 2 already, and we're going to do the 3rd round now here this spring, summer.
So to be really, I guess what I'm going in circles, but
Yep.
if it's an error that you acknowledge, it's an error that you made, will you bring the rezoning forward at the next,
No.
cutoff, or do they have to wait?
They have to wait until
list?
we do the next round.
And what they share with me is most of these people, they're ready to go, they want to get a project done. Why do I have to pay to move it forward immediately?
Then we'd handle that on a site-by-site specific basis, and I don't know any of them that have really had to wait 6 months to do a project.
Well, 2, 6, whatever. I mean,
Okay.
you're saying there's 9. My last comment, you're saying there's 9 on the list?
Yes.
If I look at the number of rezonings you have, I don't see how there's this overwhelming amount to deal with that's a staff issue, that you couldn't just bring, if you get only maybe 1 a month, you couldn't just bring them forward.
It's a staffing issue. It's a staffing, you have to post all the signs, you have to do all the legal notices, you have to go out to each one of the sites, you have to post the, we don't have staff to do that. You have to, it's a very staff-intensive process.
9 every 6 months? You don't have staff to do 1.5 a month?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, thank you, Jeff and Jason. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You're going to stay up here, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Okay, we're lucky enough to have Mr. Schmidt back to talk to us about floodplain management ordinance amendments.
Floodplain management ordinance, again, same initial introduction. I'm going to try to keep this really quick and simple. It's a very complex issue. The majority of you, I think all of you, are new to this. Back in 2009, we got the new floodplain maps, okay? Now in 2015 and 2016, we need to update the floodplain management ordinance that's on the books right now. This is mandated by the federal government through FEMA. Second slide. Okay. This all goes back to, you really need to know your history. Okay. floods happen all the time. We have significant floods in the city of Sioux Falls and the surrounding area, but everybody understands floods happen frequently. Okay? You're able to get the data. We have the data. It's available to the public. They know where there's flood risk, which is what we're talking about. So, for example, I've showed a couple of examples at Skunk Creek. And again, 'tis the season. It's spring. We have rainfall. Just doing a Google entry, I had 152 entries come up when you type in flooding. Okay, it's not something where we're talking about something, well, this never happens. Flooding happens all the time. Please understand that. That's the part of this discussion that I wanted people to understand. Okay. The National Flood Insurance Program through Community Rating System talks about floods are natural processes and floodplains are necessary to every river. I think that's what the public doesn't understand. So all the people that are home watching right now, please understand floods are natural. Okay? We need to preserve this area and protect it from encroachment by then reducing the risk to people, property, and our limited resources. Everything else beyond that is where we're going to have a little debate amongst the citizens, but they're natural and they happen. We have two processes we're going through right now. I'm really zeroing in on this first one, okay? For the levee system, the preliminary maps came out in June. The open houses were in July. We went through a 30-day comment period. The National Register was in October. The appeal process ended March 20th. I've done press releases on this too that the media is still waiting to really get on top of, but they're starting. April through June is when building permits can be reviewed. Then in July, I should get the letter of final determination. If that happens, then I want to be in front of this body to do the ordinance adoption July 5th and August 2nd. If that time changes at all, it's based upon the letter of final determination. I'm scheduling this now so that I can be on track to make sure that we get the ordinance adoption. Again, then once the ordinance adoption, then I'm shooting for the effective date of January with these new maps. This is the schedule it takes through. We started back in June, which is really, we started back in 2009. It takes a long time to get through this process. Same schedule, but different part of the city. Southwest Sioux Falls, question mark, question mark, question mark. I'm not through the appeal period, so please understand there's two separate processes. Okay. The existing ordinance, we're not changing this, but please understand, as I said at the very beginning, the purpose of the floodplain ordinance, protect human life, minimize expenditures, minimize the rescue issues, minimize prolonged businesses, minimize damage. That's the ordinance right now. We have to do these things. I mean, everybody's going to be right. Those are just so obvious. That's what we have to do. Next slide. Existing ordinance. How are you going to, what's your methods to do that? Restrict or prohibit uses in these areas. We require those uses that are vulnerable. Control alterations to floodplains. Control filling. Prevent to regulate construction. And that's all in the ordinance right now. The subdivision design floodplain areas. In March of 2016, and then I heard about it again when I was down in Phoenix, Arizona, they came out with a new zoning practice that says all these things. The last statement that I pulled out of there, which was so critical, they highlight again, floodplains are not static. They aren't. Every time it rains more, every time something happens upstream or downstream, if it happens upstream, more water's coming to us. If it happens downstream, it's backing up. The citizens of Sioux Falls, the public thinks, well, okay, this map was done, and so I'm good now, right? Floodplains are not static. So once we adopt these maps, it's going to change again. I don't know if it's in 5 years or 25 years, but take away that message, I hope, to the citizens of Sioux Falls. The ordinance amendments. I love this slide. I got this from Public Works Engineering. This is North Sioux Falls, okay? We had public meetings in July. These neighbors were really excited to have me come out and talk to them. April 10th of 1969. Based upon our history, community rating system existing, we're trying to change the ordinance. Okay, again, know your history. The city of Sioux Falls floods frequently. So the changes that we're proposing to go through. Section 1, we're going to just update some of the ordinances to make the definitions to make them consistent. Section 2, I have to change the date in the ordinance. Currently, it says the September 2nd, 2009. I'm going to change it to hopefully January 20th. Section 4, we're looking at what the flood hazard certificates are going to be required. Based upon every development in the floodplain needing a permit, we can or shall require the following things. So we're going to look at those things. Floodplain variances. This is, again, another one of those little sticky wickets. People come and they go, well, can't I get a variance for? No, we're going to put in the ordinance, you shall not be issued in a floodway or a freeboard or a base flood elevation for residential, or I'm just making it black and white. You're not going to get a variance for these things. So I'll put it in the ordinance. I'm going to ask you to give me the ability to charge a $50 fee. Right now it's $0. Every permit that I do for floodplain development, we charge $0. I'd like to get some of my staff time recovered. So I'm basically the one that does all these development applications. To give you a scope of this, I'm the floodplain administrator. I do between 600 and 700 floodplain contacts a year. And we're not recovering anything. It's just staff time, and then we're pretty busy. So provisions for, again, up at the very beginning, you get to, you need to do these things, you need to do these things, how are you going to do these things? How we're going to do them, how we're going to reduce it is upon my review of a floodplain permit, I'd like to have us do a hydraulic and hydrology analysis, okay? During that review, I'd like to be able to say no development shall obstruct flow or cause an increase. If you're in the floodplain area, you shouldn't obstruct the flow or cause any increase. Now, I've highlighted in blue on the bottom there that the City of Sioux Falls engineering design standards will look at that compliance aspect. That's why it's in blue. Specific standards for residential construction, you have to have in the first paragraph that your house has to be 2 feet above the base flood elevation. Has to be already. The second part is new. We added a section in residential construction in what Ron Bell brought through to you already, that there needs to be an MGE. I brought the MGE, minimum grade elevation, over to the floodplain. Consistent, predictable. We're trying to make sure that it's there. Section 13, standards for subdivisions. The following requirements are for all subdivisions. So again, now we're saying, here's the blue area again. If there's a special flood hazard area, then we're going to be looking at the engineering design standards shall be delineating. We want to look at up front, when you're looking at preliminary plans, when we're looking at development engineering plans, we want to know where these floodplain areas are. Chapter 11, again, I showed you 2 highlighted sections in blue that we were looking at engineering design standards, but in 11.19, we're going to look at the purpose of the standard is to define the H&H to evaluate the development for potential impacts. So again, we want to try to get out ahead of this. Section 13, this is new. Again, a lot of these things are new, but to give you an idea, I did a little diagram with Kathy Reswick on the bottom. If they're building within the special flood hazard area there in the middle, we have standards. But what about the people that build a foot away from the floodplain? Or on the right-hand side, what if they're within 20 feet of the floodplain? Shouldn't we also look at those, because floodplains are not static. So if they build right next to it, do they get to build right on the base flood elevation? Or shouldn't we have them have some also reduced risk or look at their issues? So this is how I drafted their ordinance. On the left-hand side, if they're within that same area, but their basements are being built in such a way that the hydraulics are having a force if that stream comes over and starts pushing on their basement. So again, the minimum setback shall be, the lowest floor elevation should be, there should not be a lowest opening within. So they're less of a standard than if you're in the floodplain, but we're trying to protect people next to the floodplain. I think I have 2 more. Again, floodproofing standards in non-residential structures, commercial office. Previously, we said that floodproofing wasn't allowed in the city of Sioux Falls, and then we went on to say how you floodproofed your buildings. So I had to correct it and say, here's the floodproofing. So it's just a correction. It just said floodproofing wasn't, it's just a housekeeping measure. In conclusion, floodplain management is to protect human life, minimize the expenditures, and minimize the need for rescue. That's what we're trying to do. Everything up above, we can debate it. We can have citizens that will probably, some will show up and say, I don't want to do this. And we're like, all we're trying to do is protect people. And they may not see the benefit up front, but when their house is flooded, then they come to Lance and I and say, I don't understand why you guys didn't help us protect our properties. So last slide. What ordinance and standards should be required prior to development? And I think I have Q&A.
Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. I have 3 questions. I'll try not to go over them. So my question is in regards to, we've talked a lot about developers, the new development standards. Has that been brought forward to home builders or the developer groups, and what was the feedback?
We brought it to IRAB. I'm not asking IRAB to approve it. I'm asking City Council to approve it. Their input is about as you can expect. The good ones are all like, excellent, let's do this. Others, not so interested.
Okay, thank you
Yep.
for your honesty. And then the other question, some of the floodways are changing.
Yes.
So 2 questions in regards to the floodway. What if there are current houses in a floodway? Will the city be buying any houses moving forward? Are there any houses with this that potentially could be purchased because of higher risk or needing the space?
I'll clarify the question. Floodway is where the water flows. So we absolutely have no structures in the floodway. We have structures in the floodplain, which is where the water flows outside of the stream channel and spills over. Okay, so there's probably structures and houses in the floodplain, and in those areas, we say you need to raise your house 2 feet above. You can have non-residential structures in a floodplain, but you have to have louvers and vents in there. So we don't have problems in the floodway. We've never allowed people to build in the floodway, and we don't plan on buying structures necessarily in floodplains unless we're looking at a specific channel or a specific troublesome area that we want to make improvements to that to help the overall community.
And are there any of those that are being talked about?
In the southwest area, I think we've started to do a study, but I don't know for sure at this point.
Do you know, the reason why I ask is that particular question came up in the Southwest as far as if there were going to be any purchased, if yes, possibly a couple, maybe more, maybe not. But I just was curious about the timeline with that and what we can expect to see with that.
It's always a challenging question because we'd have to discuss it. We'd have to bring it back to an informational, have a larger discussion. But you want us to spend a lot of money to take a couple people's, buy some houses, and then what's the benefit to that? So
What do you mean the benefit to that? Because the benefit would be to those customers that their house doesn't get flooded if that is going to be used as extra drainage way. I mean, that's a huge benefit. Otherwise, it's going to go right by their house.
That's what we'd have to decide. So we have to look at what's the cost of doing that, and do we then have a benefit to one house? We buy 2 houses and we improve 1 house, or do you buy 1 house and you improve 100 houses? What's the cost? What's the benefit?
Right.
So we don't just say, yes, we're going to buy a whole bunch. Well, wait a minute, there was no benefit.
So there's a study, though, is what you said.
Correct.
Okay. And is there a timeline as far as when we can anticipate that study to be done?
The second or third slide was, yes, we're basically looking at through 2017.
Okay. So those homeowners wouldn't know until about that.
We had that meeting at the beginning of May.
Okay.
Yep. So we've been out to the Southwest. We were out December 2nd, and then we were out beginning of May, and we basically said we'll be out again. So,
right.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, for me personally, thank you for doing this. I know it's a lot of work, and I know that there are a lot of benefits, and it's something that needs to be done, and it's as slow as molasses a lot of times, that this is not a fast process, and there's a lot of due diligence and making sure the homeowners understand the impacts. And I own property in a current floodway, or not floodway, floodplain, excuse me. And, you know, we did have to jump through hoops to build those houses and did that. And so I see the benefit of the standards that are in place. As water does come up higher and things of that nature. And so I appreciate all your efforts with this, and thanks for being here today.
Sure. Yeah, you know, Christine brought up a great issue. I mean, the only reason I mentioned the 600 to 700 contacts that I have in a year is because I take them all, and you have 3 or 4. Yeah, you have 3 or 4. Yep. You have 3 or 4 in every house. And then I want to make sure they're getting the same message, and then I'm talking to everybody. So when they call, I'm like, it's a huge, complex issue. It's not like, yeah, just go on to talk to FEMA and find. You have to talk to all of them.
And it's not, and it doesn't just stop with you. It goes to my insurance company, and goes to, you know, the neighbors, and it goes to, I mean, it's very complex. So appreciate it.
Councilor Urbanbach.
Thank you. Jason, could you go back to the slide where the diagram is of a floodway and plain and la, la, la? You know, when you started this presentation, Jeff, you talked about how most of us weren't here when you started this conversation, but many of us have been here for most of this conversation. And so the thing that threw me was on this chart, all of the labels now. Have I missed something in terminology changes? I know what a floodplain is, but now you have a special flood hazard area, flood fringe area, floodway, and a stream channel. Can you talk about terminology, and as a homeowner, what might be my concerns about just the terminology alone?
Yeah. All of those are underneath floodplain, special flood hazard area. So people call and they say, I just need to know my risk. And I'm like, you got to go over every detail. And you're like, the floodway is this, and then the floodplain includes the floodway and the flood fringe, and then those are your special flood hazard area. And then are you in an A or an AE district? And at that point, they're like, and again, that's where I try to figure out who my client is and my customers, and I go, okay, let me just explain, and then I'll get down to just answering their question. But at the same time, usually they're like, I need to know everything. So answering your question, yes, everyone is a different challenge and a different predicament. When we were talking, Diane Best and Lance were talking today, we were going over terminology about what FEMA requires, and it's complicated. So having one person give that message is nice, and being consistent so that they're not confused on, so is it floodplain what we're really talking about? Yes, it's floodplain and a special flood hazard area.
Okay, so number one, I think that folks need to understand that it's a big complex area, but I think that the other piece of it is that most of those folks that are involved with this really have been following your conversation since 2009. Many, many, many of them have been.
Better, yes.
In the what we call a floodplain now, and the maps are going to change. So the question then is, say I haven't been paying attention since 2009. Right. Where can I find that information? I need to look at that old map. Oh my gosh, I'm in the old map. I need to look at the new map. I'm out of the new map. How do I find that?
It's on our new updated beautiful website.
Great. Under what?
Everything's under zoning. Okay. So when you go to zoning, and this is where it gets a little confusing too, but I usually am talking to the client, and they come up to our service counter, and so we show them, and then I teach them how to fish, and so that I show them versus just answering their question. Or when I have them online, I go, can you please go to Sioux Falls, or click on zoning, click on floodplain management. Okay, now see on the right-hand side where it says, compare the 2011 map to the 2015 map, and they look at it, and I go, type in your address, like, that is the best thing ever.
Great.
And it shows 2015 to the 2011 map, red is bad, and green is good, and it shows them that the green is coming out, and they're like, that's all I need to know. And I'm like, and would you please tonight when you're having a drink with your neighbor, explain to your neighbor? And they're like, well, that's how I found out about it. I'm like, I know, because it's springtime and they're all up. And so then I'm like, and then please have them come down to the service counter and I'll help them again.
And if I could just echo what Councilor Erickson said, in that this is a huge project. And Jeff, you've been carrying the load for us, and we appreciate it. We do as citizens, we do as city council. You're doing great work, and we appreciate the detail that you're going to serve these folks. Thank you.
Councilor Neisert?
First of all, having served on the Board of Adjustment, reading FEMA documents is a cure for insomnia. It's pretty riveting. So the floodplain development application fee, is that only going to be triggered if you look and you determine they're in the SFHA? Okay.
If you're in a special flood hazard area, any development requires a floodplain development permit.
Okay. All
So,
right. So it won't be
yes.
to every single building permit? And,
No.
Okay. Just if you're in the...
That was
okay.
Diane's question, too.
Okay.
It's a good question, Greg. Thank you.
I think I'm with you on the idea of taking the variance thing out of it. There's a history there. I won't go into that.
But you know it very well. Yep.
And then I would say one thing that needs to be said is that this is going to unleash, it must be millions, tens of millions of dollars of pent-up demand of
Yes.
people that have been waiting. I mean, some people are being brought in and they're not going to be happy about it, but there's so much that is going to be opened up along Louise and all by the mall that have been waiting years to develop.
Typically, when like the Argus has asked me the question, back in 2008, we went from 800 properties, parcels, to 2,600 properties that we brought in. And that was a really bad process that I went through. I took 800 to 2,600 properties. Now with the new maps, we're going to have 500 properties in the floodplain. And so 2,600 down to 500. So we have a lot of people that are waiting for this new ordinance.
Yeah, and just one final statement that's good for citizens to know. Most of these regulations aren't just things that we just throw in because we want to. If we want to be part of the FEMA program, we have to enforce regulations and make people develop responsibly, because FEMA in the end will be paying the claims if we flood. So most of this we have to put in there, and because we are to be essentially a city that's part of it, we have to do this. So,
Councilor Staley?
Back to, you made a comment to Councilwoman Erickson about an existing house that's in the floodplain will have to be raised up 2 feet. Did I hear that?
You basically heard it right, correct. As Jason has here, that house that's encroached in that area, if they want to stay there, they don't have to do anything. They just pay flood insurance, okay? If they want to build in a floodplain, they can build in a floodplain. You have to be raised 2 feet above the base flood elevation. If that existing house that Jason has up on the screen wants to come in and rebuild there, or if they want to double in size, because they want to stay, they love their location. Okay, this is Pam Road on Cliff and 41st Street. The house is there. If they want to stay there, they have to raise up 2 feet above the base flood elevation, because FEMA, which I totally agree with, you go, why exasperate the problem? If they're there, why are you letting them continue to have more and more flood problems?
But it's just if they double. So if they're going to put a little addition on.
The legal term is substantially improve. 50%.
And then they have to lift the whole house up 2 feet, or just that addition?
They have to, if they substantially improve, then that improvement has to be above.
Okay.
Correct.
So not the.
Not the main house, right? Yes. Councilor Marshall?
Hi, Jeff. Is there a count on how many homes that will now be in the floodplain that weren't before?
Not homes or structures. I'm going to jump all the way back to Greg's. I just don't have, I mean, people ask me that, FEMA asks me all the time, and I'm like, I just don't count that way. Parcels are pretty easy, but then to go in and try to count structures, it's just too time consuming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, hearing no other comments, and I have none. Jeff, thank you very much. Jason, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And
Chair, I move that the council move into an executive session regarding consulting with legal counsel or review communications with legal counsel about for any litigation or contractual matters.
Second.
And a second from Erpenbach. All in favor? No vote. We're just going into it. That's right. I would ask that the council chambers be, I don't want to use the word, vacated.